Oh, this is easy. This stuff is super easy. Okay, let's give it a second here. Jim Collison, we are live from Heartland Developer Conference 2018 here in Omaha, Nebraska, doing interviews all week. I appreciate you watching. And Adhithi, thanks for coming out. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me here.
Let's get to know you a little bit about who you are, where you work, what you do, those kinds of things.
Okay, I'm Adhithi Ravichandran. I'm a senior software engineer, and I work for a healthcare startup based in Kansas City. It's called ReadyWiz Health, and we primarily work on React Native apps. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of years now.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with React, talk a little bit about it. What is it? What does it do? What's it best at? Those kinds of things.
Okay, so React Native is for the mobile platform, and it's basically a UI library that uses React, which is the JavaScript framework. And what is the special thing about React Native is that it uses JavaScript, and you can code your entire mobile application using JavaScript, and works great for both iOS and Android.
So for someone who's pretty experienced in JavaScript already,
it's really easy. Yep, this is perfect for web developers to get on mobile development.
Yeah, maybe our C# friends that don't have as much JavaScript, they could easily use this as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easy. As long as they learn JavaScript, it's easy. Yeah.
Okay.
If you know good JavaScript and get your feet wet with React, then React Native is pretty easy.
Okay. Yep. And let's talk a little bit about your session. Give me the title.
Okay.
And then let's dig into it a little bit.
So yesterday I spoke about the 10 lessons I learned building React Native apps. It basically goes over some of the mistakes I've made and lessons we learned as a startup, and wanted to talk through about all of those. So my audience, don't make the same mistakes and some of the lessons I learned.
As developers, we don't ever make mistakes.
Of course.
Right? So these are lessons you learned by preventing your mistakes.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Right? Some of the best lessons we learned are that way. What just talk a little bit about those. What were some lessons that you learned?
The first thing for me was to learn React. Because when I jumped into React Native a couple of years ago, I was in a C++ and Java background in my previous job. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to build mobile applications using React Native. But I had no idea what I was doing and just started using, just coding the prototype.
Yeah.
But after a while, I realized that, I need to learn React fundamentals, because that's what this is. You're essentially a React developer if you're using React Native. So that was one of the big things. And, mobile development with the styling, it's different from the web. You need to account for different screen sizes. You have tablets, you have phones, and your users might have like ancient Android phones you've never seen. So accounting for all those things were some of the lessons I learned.
Let me ask you on screen size, because I'm not a developer, a web developer. So, but I hear a lot about, being able to, you always have to account for all these screen sizes.
Yeah.
Is that getting any easier? I mean, certainly by now we know we're going to have 10-inch tablets, 12-inch tablets. We're going to have 7-inch phones. We're going to have big screens. Are there things that are making that easier for developers where they don't necessarily have to account for every single different screen size?
So as long as you do your styling right, you should be good for the most part. With React Native, the special thing is you don't do CSS. There is no CSS. It's all done in JavaScript. So you get a pretty good, accurate math going on there. You don't do like hard coding of, if it's an iPhone X, do this.
Right,
Instead, you use
Which we
your
used
math.
to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are libraries that give you the exact dimensions of your phone width and phone height. You get the size and you do the math based on that. So you essentially program it based on the screen width and height, which is unknown.
Right.
So as long as you're doing it right, you should be fine. But you never know. You might run into like a new phone like iPhone X, which looks entirely different. There's a whole top area that is covered, so we have to account for that as well. But it's definitely getting easier. Yeah.
Coming from C++ and Java, and if we at Gallup, we work with high school students. We teach them. They come in on Saturdays, and we teach them code. What kind of advice would you give to someone getting into the JavaScript world today? What did you do, or what did you find helpful?
So for me, JavaScript was honestly so much easier, having all the knowledge that I had with C++ and Java, because I got my fundamentals covered. So for a student who's learning, I would suggest they start with some of these languages like Java or C++, learn the fundamentals, get your design patterns right, and understand the fundamentals of algorithms. And once you get that, getting into JavaScript or any other language is a breeze.
Yeah, we are finding I'm getting students who are coming in and their first language is JavaScript.
I see.
So without the C++ or without those fundamentals of an object-oriented language in the background, what would you recommend of some tools to help them? Because they want to do JavaScript.
Sure.
So what kind of tools could they use?
So they could take out the design patterns books. There are so many good books they can learn from. Because what happens when you learn JavaScript first is it's just an easier way. You don't learn some of the things that we've learned the hard way, and we probably end up making some mistakes. So I would suggest maybe learning the algorithms, the fundamentals of complexities and how those work, so you can write good, efficient code.
Okay.
Understanding some data structures, probably. Because those don't need a certain language. You just need pseudocode and understanding data structures and
this is
some
for
design patterns.
For my own personal use or advice to them, C++ or Java, if I had to learn one or the other for them, which one would you recommend?
I would, thinking about it retrospectively, I would choose Java.
Okay.
I learned C first back when I was in school
Right.
in India, because they teach you
right.
really young.
Right. Yeah.
So I learned C when I was in 8th grade, which was overwhelming. And then I went on to C++ and moved on to Java. But if you were to choose now, I would say Java.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think you need to learn pointers or any of that anymore.
The natural progression, we see this in our schools here, even in the US, C first, and then they'll take C++, then Java. You could insert C# in there, right?
Yeah.
Either one of those two. Good. Well, no, that's actually helpful to me. We, like I said, we get a lot of students coming in first language JavaScript. We've actually taught first language JavaScript, although we do have them learn some HTML, CSS as well, or they'll come in with that experience.
Okay.
You're saying here, no, you're not using CSS at all, right? So this
we
could
don't
be
use
a pure
CSS at all.
Yeah.
We use plain JavaScript for
Right.
styling. Yep.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But it's very similar to CSS, like the background colors and padding and all of the same concepts, but you just use plain JavaScript.
syntax is a little bit different, in getting it done. So you had 10 items, 10 things.
Yeah.
What? Give me one of those. What's the most
first one
important?
was learn React
Yeah, okay.
and think about styling. It's different than the web styling, because once you get into the mobile platform, you have to think about your users and their phone sizes and all of that stuff. Another big one is the performance, because you don't want to give them a heavily loaded app that you put on your user's phone.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a website. So people have to install this. It needs to perform really well.
Right.
So that is something we need to think about.
Yeah. With React, when we're creating the apps like this, what's the difference between these and a native from a performance? That's always been a problem.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think, but what's the difference?
So in terms of the native apps, of course, native apps are going to be better as of today in terms of performance, if you look at the iOS and the Android. But coming from a startup point of view for us, when we started React Native, we needed one code base, one team that could do iOS and Android. And our strength was JavaScript too. So we had developers do one code base. So about 95% of the code is shared. So there are lots of pros to doing React Native. And it does use native. It is not a web app. It is a native app, which is basically Facebook created a wrapper around the components, the native components. So you're essentially using all the native components. There are some performance issues with the transitions between screens and things like that, but they're actively working towards fixing some of those. So I think it has a good future.
Speed, there we go.
Yeah.
So speed to market faster. In other words, with React, can I create, because am I getting 2 for 1? I'm getting both iPhone and Android, right?
Yeah,
and
of course.
And so speed to market faster, would you say that's a true statement?
Definitely, and it's got great UI, and it's much easier to pick up. You don't need to do the same pain points. You don't need to get into your native iOS and native Android code. It's all under the hoods, and you don't even need to know about it, and you can get on board as many JavaScript developers as you want to get coding this, and it's still native, which is great. And the community for React is pretty great too, because
hold on. Let me tell for folks who are watching on the video. Just a second. Hold that thought. At the beginning of this, when we have this Jenga thing, and everybody asked what would happen when the Jenga falls, and I've been joking all week or the last couple of days. You got to do 10 push-ups, but nobody's been willing to do them. until
He's the
now.
only one
In
who
the middle
did
of the
it.
interview, he dropped and gave us 10.
That's
So that was
awesome.
pretty cool. Okay, I interrupted you. We were talking about speed to deployment
Yep.
and ease of use, getting JavaScript developers in there faster. Anything else you'd add to that?
Also, deployments are easier. Of course, you have to go to the Apple Store and the Google Play, but all of that is automated.
Right.
You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And you have tons and tons of UI kits that you can use. People are actively contributing to this. It's absolutely open source. So,
Do they have a
there's a lot of-
bootstrap then too, as well, where I could just pull something in and a lot of the controls are already there?
yeah, there are a lot of React Native UI kits you can use. Not essentially Bootstrap, but
Yeah.
you have like material design, depending on what your look and feel of your app needs to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's essentially a UI kit basically.
Mhm. And the community can contribute to that. So
yeah, it's absolutely 100% open source. Of course, the core contributors are from Facebook, the React and the React Native community. But you can contribute as much as you want, which is great because if you have bug fixes, you can go fix it for yourself if you want it quicker. So,
yeah, well, it's always nice to have lots of help
Yeah.
from a community standpoint.
Yeah.
As well. As you look out into the future, what do you see out there? Certainly, it's not a static product. Things are always moving and always changing. Facebook's always moving and always changing.
Of course.
What are you seeing in the future?
I think in the future they're gonna take care of the performance issues that we see today, which are not extremely huge to an end user point of view. And I think it's gonna pretty much take over native apps because it's technically native, written in JavaScript. Because JavaScript
Really?
has such a huge future,
Yeah.
and React is extremely popular library, and this uses React and comes from Facebook too. So I think it's got a big future ahead.
Yeah, if I was in high school or college and I was thinking I want to kind of get into this and start doing this, what are my first steps? Like, what would I do to just get started with
If
this?
you're in high school or college, as we talked about earlier, you probably want to get your programming fundamentals
Right.
nailed down, because with what happens with libraries like React Native or React is a lot of the things are under the hood and you don't know what's happening. You don't necessarily need to know, but it's better if you want to have a career out of programming. You want to understand some of the data structures. So to get started is extremely easy. You just take a kit, a boilerplate, and get started, get set up. You get it running in 10 minutes. So that could be exciting for a high schooler. Convince them to get into STEM.
Is it dependent on a PC platform? I mean, I'm assuming I do this on
You
PC.
could do
right?
it on Windows or Mac. It just doesn't
Either-
matter.
either way.
Either one would work pretty well. But we've
Preferred?
noticed Mac is better
No.
because you're doing some amount of iOS,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So what happens with these iOS products is there is some dependency with the machine. So I've noticed it's faster and better with Mac. I started off with the Windows and then we had to order a Mac.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I got a few questions at the end. What kind of questions do you get after a presentation like
A
this?
lot
What
of
kind
them
questions?
wanted to know why React Native and why not something like Ionic. Ionic is written in JavaScript too, but Ionic is a web view. It's basically a web page that is converted into an app. So you don't get the native, you don't get a camera, you don't get a fingerprint scanner, and stuff like that. But React Native is completely native, which is why we took this. And it's also, if you have a budget constraint, it works out well too. And people had questions about, can we port over our React app to a React Native app, which is also totally doable. So yeah.
Does it just come across, or is there some things you got to do with it?
So if you have a web page, which is React, and you want to convert it into a React Native app, you just need to take all your business logic, consolidate that, and share that. But then you still need to redo some of the UI. But you can have shareable code. Yeah.
Okay. As you think about the future of mobile,
Yeah.
and I mean, you're in this space all the time, right? Any thoughts on what might be coming, or some exciting things that you're seeing ahead?
It might just take over. Like the iPhone X has face recognition now, and some of the Android phones have that too.
Yeah.
I guess Oculus, that'll be interesting to see what they have. 3D virtual reality stuff. So.
Yeah, there's some interesting things ahead. I'll ask you this question. I asked your significant other the same question.
Okay.
Will there be a date today? We just mentioned when you develop mobile apps, you're developing them on a PC or on a Mac, right? Do you think are we getting any closer to actually being able to do the development on the mobile app itself?
Probably not yet. I still need my monitors and a huge keyboard. If I can do all of that stuff.
What if you could plug your phone in and it would power?
Probably,
power
yeah. But I
monitor?
don't know why we would need to do that.
Yeah.
as long as you have a PC.
Just kind of wondering if that's a natural progression we're starting to see.
Could be, yeah. You never
We're starting
know.
to see some,
Because your phone does so much more than what
well,
it used
think
to
how
a few
powerful
years
the
ago.
chip is in both Android and
It could.
iOS
Yeah.
machines, and we know Qualcomm is making
Sure.
a real effort to really boost the power of their ARM chips,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's Microsoft's taking a look at it. It's given Intel a little bit of a run, and power consumption, right? I
Yeah.
mean, think about being able to be completely disconnected for hours and still be able to do the development that you need to do because you're just typing, right?
That's we're just doing code. No
You're just
Google.
typing.
No Google. No
You're
help
just
from
typing.
anybody. Yeah.
Adhithi, thanks for taking the time
so
to be
much.
a part
It
of
was a
this
pleasure.
today. I appreciate you coming on. If you're watching the video, we have one more interview that we're going to do today. It's right below this one, just down below there. And we'll be back here in a few minutes with it again. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Hang tight for me one sec here.